It sounds great. What's also great is seeing everyone here today. I'd say we get it going. We're 3 minutes past 8 p.m. In Europe time. Glad to see everyone. In case you're wondering, why me? Where's Reinhard? Reinhard is out today. He told me to tell you he's sick, and I told him to tell you he's soft. But nevertheless, he can't be here today. But I'll be filling in. I'm Chris. I'm Reinhard's business partner in Light 'em Up. More of a guy behind the scenes. Big cigar fan as well. Actually, just got a few days ago for Christmas the Smoky Moses razor cut, which I'll be using first time today. So pretty excited about that. And we're having here with us Vlada Stojanov. Great to have you. Maybe you say a few words, and obviously in the usual style of the Light 'em Up Lounge, we got a couple of questions prepared and hopefully get a nice conversation going. I see a lot of familiar faces. As always, your questions are appreciated. So with that, let's start the show.
Awesome. Chris, first of all, thanks for the introduction. Everybody, thanks for taking the time off to attend this. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas time and New Year's. Like Chris introduced me, my name is Vlada Stojanov. Funnily enough, he actually pronounced the last name perfectly because, again, in the United States, everybody says that it's Stojanov. So very funny. I very much appreciate that. My background is primarily hospitality. I have a hospitality degree and economics degree with a focus on tourism. I've done kind of very similar path, I want to say, like Reinhard, which is why we tend to hit things off very, very well. Right, 4 or 5 star hospitality for the most part. And then I stumbled into cigars during the sommelier, which is right a short for a wine expert. However, that term has been co-opted by many other industries. So I've kind of stumbled into cigars really during that training. And my first cigar was actually an exceptional one as your first cigar. It was a Cuban punch, done by Zdravko Brkic in Belgrade, one of the distributors for La Casa del Habano, and in my opinion, one of the foremost experts when it comes to Cubans. And my dad always smoked cigars, so his favorite was a Roman Julieta number 2. Been enjoying those since early 90s. So I went from trying that one punch, and a lot of the things could easily translate from the wine world to the cigar world, right? Like the terroir, the blending, the aging, the specific signatures of both the blenders or the factories, or sometimes both, really come to the fore. So it was really interesting to kind of dive into it. And then when I moved to the States, I set up a distribution company, with it initially being Bespoke Cigars, which is now Castagli, and then bringing more brands on board. And ultimately, after about a 5-year period, I wanted to make it a little project for myself, where it will kind of be an exploration of things that aren't really popular yet, right? One of the best-selling blends at the moment would be San Andres as the wrapper, and then Nicaraguan binder and filler. Instead, for the first 2 projects, one was done with Kellner Boutique Factory. Hendrik, I believe, is an absolute genius, and he was very kind enough to let go of this 1997 wrapper that his dad did. So 25 years old at this point, basically. So very limited, only 2 bales used, so about 3,000 cigars, give or take. So that's the shining star of the combination. That there's a 2007 binder, and basically it's a highlight of what those tobaccos are. And the other one, which I'm very, very excited, this comes out of Honduras and uses a type of tobacco that I personally never really loved. Right, you tend to gravitate towards certain things where, maybe you prefer Ecuadorian Habano or San Andres Puro or whatever. To me, broadleaf was just, I never really loved it. I was like, yeah, cool. I got to be in the mood to kind of enjoy it. And then I tasted Honduran broadleaf for the first time, and really, at least on its own, at least that I know of, rather. It's going to be the driving point, or the driving focal point of this cigar. And it gives you medium to full flavor. In terms of, when I say flavor, I really do mean the impact on the actual palate, right? Like how easy it is to perceive things, with light to medium strength, which is really, really weird in my mind for a broadleaf. And then the impact on the palate is, again, a light to medium. So you get all this incredibly full flavor with very, very little strength and very little body. And the only person who actually tried these on was Andre, and he gave it a good score. But Andre is also on the Cigar Journal review panel with me. Sorry, I know that was a little long. Please stop me at any point if I'm like the dog from Up. I just squirrel, just stop me.
Fantastic, Vlad. No, obviously the true expert here, and let me start off with a question here. And obviously you're an independent distributor. Can you walk us through a bit what a year, what a month looks like for you? What are the things you care about, and just bring us a little closer to this profession of yours. I think that would be very interesting, and I got a couple of other follow-up questions regarding that.
Sure. So my month typically looks like 2 to 3 weeks of travel, and when I say weeks, that really means Thursday through Sunday. Thursday through Sunday, maybe Saturday, depending, or Saturday or Sunday. So typically 3 days on the road where I do events, cut-in lights, right? Getting these cigars into people's hands and creating memories and friendships. And I know these people because I've been doing this for years at this point. And I've been to these same stores a couple of different times, right? I've seen some of the guys have, their kids getting married. And I'm like, cool, absolutely, man. Hey, here's a bunch of cigars for your cigar bar. Like, it's a gift for me. You build these relationships. So yeah, my month looks like basically building relationships, whether it's existing ones or with new people.
When you think back to your first days, was it yourself on the road meeting those retailers, or did you have someone to kind of who you could shadow in a way, and then you started to make your way?
No, it was just me. So I still worked when I set up the distribution company. I still worked in hospitality. I was working at a 5-star hotel in Santa Barbara called the Pucara. And then I moved to San Isidro Ranch, another 5-star, 5 diamonds, everything but the kitchen sink when it comes to awards, and truly one of the most beautiful, epic places in the world. So I kept doing this as a little side project, and I approached the business the same way I approach hospitality, right? Take care of people, because ultimately people buy from people they like. Mm-hmm. It also really helps if the cigars or whatever the product is really good. So I go back, right, basically, exactly. Santa Barbara is America's Monaco. I 100% agree with that. So really what it comes down to is it was service, and cigars are a consumable good. I've also done wine sales, right? Both as a retailer, as on the distribution side, on the wholesale side, on the actual production side, in a custom crush facility. So I know the inside, and a lot of the things very, very easily translate. Obviously the industry is a lot smaller than something like wine or spirits, but ultimately I focused on taking care of people and getting into people's hands. And obviously the brands that all have a different story and a unique take. Ultimately, I have to like the cigar. I have to believe that it adds something to the conversation, something to the overall profile. Because if it's
yeah,
right.
I mean, if that this is one of the classic characteristic of the cigar industry is there's no or hardly any direct to consumer. Maybe there's a Davidoff or a few other brands, but you become the point of sales of the brand. They have to trust you to make a great pitch of the product, and then you only can do that, I assume, by actually liking it yourself. Otherwise, if you're not convinced yourself, how are you going to convince someone else?
Exactly. And that's very, very apparent. So in the portfolio, talking retail pricing, I have cigars that go from $5 to $50 or $60. So there's quite a bit of a range, and every brand has its own unique identity, might I add, with very different business philosophies with each of them. Some are just about volume, some are about placement, some lack direction or are figuring it out still. So that's where I kind of come in. And also one of the reasons why, and anybody who's built a business will easily understand this. I like things done a certain way, and I like to basically, I'm not control obsessive, but I want things done at a certain level, which again is years and years of 4- and 5-star hospitality where things just have to be done a certain way, because that's what takes, that ultimately takes care of people. It makes sure that you don't really thanks. Yeah, it is. Okay, so the real thing was I've obsessed about doing it a certain way until I found people where I've spoken to a lot of people who have built their businesses, right? I've started with one person and now they built it to hundreds, where they basically said, at some point, you got to be happy with something being done 95% of the way or 90% of the way. And then as you grow, it might be only done 80% of the way. But you got to be comfortable with that. And when things do go wrong, they need to be empowered to make things right. And you lead by example. That's really always been the thing. I've started managing in hospitality when I was literally a kid, 22 years old. And in order to get, you can get in my mind, right, a grizzled veteran at 35 to kind of at least listen to the kid. You have to lead by example. You have to work harder than everybody else. If you say this is the way it's done, it's got to be done that way every time. And yeah, so basically, right, a high standard. And I've kind of let that go, and now I have multiple sales reps, and I trust them, and I'm very flexible in how I work with them. Some prefer to be contacted more often. Some prefer to just leave us alone, make sure that we have the stuff, and when we reach out once every 3 weeks or once a month, like, just have the answers for us. And if you don't have the answers, let us know within a couple of days, and that's it. But it did require kind of me taking a big breath and like, all right, my babies are going out into the world, and my hope is that the people that I'm working with will tell the story the right way, will treat them the right way, will put them in the right places, will nail the same thing, right? All of these things that I actually wouldn't wish that on anyone, to copy my brain and insert into theirs, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Macy, what's your take on this?
Oh, so I almost didn't unmute. I almost pulled a Blanco and didn't unmute myself in honor of Jose Blanco. No, you brought up the Davidoff point earlier, and so my 20s were wild. I got to ask the question before I lose it, But I love what Davidoff's. I mean, first of all, let me admit I'm a Davidoff fanboy. Davidoff, I would say, is my favorite brand, probably in the cigar world, most likely. They're expensive, obviously, but they're beautiful, and I've find that they tend. Anyway, I do like their direct. My question's about direct to market, and I'm very interested in Vlada's perspective on this point, especially. I think, like all cigar lovers, or like all really serious cigar obsessives, I've got a dream of having a cigar blend and a brand one day, pipe dream. My question is related to what you offer, or the decision a brand owner or a company would have in terms of how they want to market and deliver their products, ultimately to the end consumer for purchase, whether you want to do a direct to market, whether you want to go traditional retail, whether that's brick and mortar, online, a combination thereof. I I do like what Davidoff's doing, and I think for them it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Going direct to market primarily through their website with, I think now only 2 flagship stores, New York, or maybe there are 2 in New York. There's one in Houston. By the way, though, really helpful. I had a question about a new lighter. The Houston manager helped me, texted me. Really great service when you need it. But once again, so I like what they're doing. I bought the lighter online, and then when I needed services, I called them. He texted me. So they were adept in helping me. But my thought is, like, when I go to a store to buy Davidoff, I'm going to a store, I'm going to a website to buy Davidoff. Davidoff has driven that sale. So it doesn't make sense to me really for Davidoff to give up some of their margin. In their case, probably a lot of margin to give up. That's right. But to give up some of that margin to a retailer, a Corona cigar, or whoever is selling, as opposed to just selling it themselves. And I wonder if that's not the case for a lot of other brands. For example, I think Padron could do that. Arturo Fuente could certainly do that. I think even a lot of smaller brands might even be able to do that, to where I get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, that so much of the marketing to the consumer is done by the time that purchase is made, that the consumer, very rarely am I going and buying a cigar and just kind of looking and finding there's really nothing I haven't heard of. And by the time I get to that point through all the social media, everything else. So I feel like the brand has essentially made that sale in most cases, certainly with some of these bigger brands. So why should they give up the margin as opposed to adopting a more Davidoff style of just, driving them to our website? Maybe we have 1 or 2 flagship stores if we're big enough, and really trying to keep some of that margin in-house, that positive externality, to use an economics phrase, as opposed to giving that to a retailer that's kind of not really doing a lot to drive the sale. At least that's my impressions. And correct me, I might be very wrong.
So it's a phenomenal question, and it's a very nuanced one. So Macy, if I may, I'll kind of try and piecemeal. So why don't more consumers go, or sorry, why don't more brands go direct to consumer or DTC? Couple of reasons. It requires, first and foremost, the shops don't like it. That's the first reason. A lot of the big brands that have done it can get away with it because they are big brands. And I agree with you. I think Davidoff is a phenomenal brand. I've been working on this limited edition Davidoff book for everything from 2000 to 2020 that's been released with Paul Patel, Davidoff guy, on Instagram. So if you follow him, and he has one of the most extensive collections, and we've smoked, I have 1 cigar left to review, and that should be done. So Davidoff gets away with it because, let me make a car comparison. I would consider Davidoff a Mercedes. So if Mercedes said, we don't want to deal with dealerships anymore, or we still want to deal with some of the dealerships, but we're going to build a Mercedes brand center, they could get away with it. Because Mercedes has a long history, much like Davidoff, where they've been obsessive about quality, and they're vertically integrated. But more importantly, Davidoff was initially a distribution brand, right? Like, they were distributed to retailers who helped build the actual recognition of the brand, right? They didn't start with direct to consumer. They started wholesaling first, which, again, the margins are lower, but when you're vertically integrated and you can command and deserve to command this price, I do want to highlight that they deserve to command this price, whether people think they're expensive or not. I have smoked tens, probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of Davidoffs. I have never had a construction issue on any of them. And the only way to do it is with obsessive quality control. Their direct-to-consumer website has from an economical standpoint, right, has probably a very low cost of maintenance, right? Ultimately, it's a website. They need a shopping profile. However, it does raise some other issues, right? When you make a purchase with a credit card, especially in the United States, and you ever claim, hey, this was never delivered, there was fraud, blah, 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 typically the credit card companies or whoever's facilitating will side on the side of the consumer. So there is a good chunk of fraud happening with every one of these big retailers, right? No different than Walmart having a breakage percentage, right? Like, just for stuff that's getting stolen, stuff getting returned, all these other things. A lot of the brands have tried to do direct to consumer. One of the brands that did direct to consumer first and then went wholesale is JSK Restate. So he built his following on direct to consumer and then expanded to shops, which is basically the opposite of the model. I do agree with you that if anybody would try to do it, it would probably be Padron. So ultimately, the question comes, would you build a direct to consumer if, say, your Fuente does that to an extent? Obviously, there isn't like a Fuente brand in lounge, but I live in Vegas, so we have Casa Fuente here. Monte Cristo and CI, those are examples of big brands going into direct to consumer, right? Where
So
their margins
accessories,
go up.
Fuente, sorry to interrupt, but Fuente, I've directly purchased ashtrays, other accessories from Fuente.
Correct, but to my knowledge, they don't do cigars direct to consumer. And accessories are kind of a, gray area that most retailers don't care. Accessories, and I would say that accessories should be a big part of your overall product mix and sales mix. But that's really what it comes down to. Most brands go for wholesale because they want to build the recognition, right? Get it into as many hands as possible. And then when you do become a Davidoff, it might take you 50, 60, 100 years, then you can go direct to consumer, should you choose to. Padron hasn't done it. And Padron doesn't have a sales force. It's unique in this entire industry. You need something, you call them, you send them a fax, you send them an email. It is incredible. I absolutely adore them, and I've never had an issue with them construction-wise. And their cigars are phenomenal. To me, that's a benchmark brand, similar to Davidoff. So
to add on a point here that Rusty just made about Warped Cigars, for example, they're also going direct to consumer, and I've personally ordered from them. And it brings another point to the table, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Vlada, on this, if you would agree or not. But it's also your DNA. So if you're Padron or Fuente going into becoming an online player, as you said, having the sales force out there, being the point of sales, that requires skill set, the effort, the stamina to do it. And some just say, no, that's not our type of business. And Warped Cigar, as opposed, started is obviously a lot younger, started smaller, primarily digital. And Davidoff, on the other side, has a lot of other products too. For them, it was probably rather low risk to try to use that big brand and venture into a more digital space. And that, I think the DNA is also a key part here.
100% agreed. So Warped is a good example where he built a recognition based, I would say, around him and his cigars. Very, very different marketing, very youthful, very, 21st century approach in a business that is primarily rooted in traditional values, artwork, stuff like that, right? Like it's a traditional industry. He pushed the envelope again, much younger, very tech savvy, very approachable, and he's done a phenomenal job. As to the success of Drop, I don't know how successful or it isn't, but there are one-off blends that are specifically available through Kyle's website. I don't think going direct to consumer is a problem as long as you're transparent. Jake Wyatt is another example. For example, Jake Wyatt is a small boutique brand done by Mardo brothers. They're good friends. They've done both direct to consumer through their website as well as wholesale. Now, as most online retailers, they have a shops point system, loyalty program, et cetera, et cetera. The only things that their points and discounts and all the other things don't apply is to their own brand. So from a retailer protection standpoint, that is very fair, which kind of brings to the other thing, right? Price protection, right? Once you go to bigger retailers, they will push the envelope, especially if you don't have it written out where you say you can't discount this. And very few, correct, pure protection isn't for retailers. Correct. It's really, you don't want to piss off your customers. You can't really be successful in business if you continuously make people unhappy unless you're in New York. So I think that's a valid one. Exactly. And I agree. The consumers are customers, but to the wholesaler, the retailers are their customers. And they ultimately, a lot of people have this, they don't look at it as a chain. I do, because ultimately you look at the end consumer. And I've done this. Where people have reached out, be like, hey, this cigar is damaged, or it's mercury retrograde or whatever. And I'll go, hey man, no problem. Send me your address. Give me your Venmo. And I'll Venmo in $25, because guess what? They weren't happy with the product. And I personally stand behind them because I picked the damn product. I'm putting my integrity on it. So if things do go right, like things go wrong, I'll fix it, and I'll err on the side of generosity, because the hospitality side. So the retailers ultimately help you build your brand, and you help build your brand. So for all of these cigars that I distribute, I build the brand. I drive the narrative, because ultimately, if the manufacturers wanted to do it, they'd move to the United States and spend time doing it. Or alternatively, they can let someone build the brand for the next number of years and then pull a quick one on. So, which is a model that sometimes works.
May I jump in quick? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, on a discussion, and I mean, Vlada, I mean, first of all, your economics background comes through. I love people with that. I mean, you're a realist. I mean, I really appreciate that. This is a comment not really directed at you, but it's just a general comment from a lot of prior podcasts here, elsewhere in media. So I don't mean this at you, but I would like your perspective on it. And I understand everyone has their own interest. I'm not in the cigar business. I'm a lawyer in Mississippi. So that gives me, quite frankly, a freedom that I think very few other people on the podcast have. That's just, let me say that there is so much politicking going on. Everyone has an angle. Not everyone, but a lot of people, they're in the business. And I get that. But I just say my perspective as someone not in the business. So that is what that is. So I might offend more people and might upset, I might engage in taboos because of that. But I'm a crazy bastard, and these are my genuine thoughts. Sorry. There is so much, anything that is sold brick and mortar. I mean, look at Amazon. Look at what Tesla's doing. There are efficiencies and innovation. And I just feel like so much of what's going on is trying to prop up an inefficient brick and mortar system. Online's fine. And here's the thing, lounges are great. In-person that actually offer an experience. But there is no point for me to go to a brick and mortar store, buy the same cigars. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go home and smoke them in my backyard or a lounge or whatever, and pay a huge markup. And there's an absolute disservice on these forums when people say, oh, you pay a couple dollars more. No, you don't. You pay a lot more. Thousands and thousands of dollars a year. And I just think it's disrespectful when they're like, oh, it's the consumer's money. Who cares? We only care about retailers. And I'm like, well, actually, retailers are a conduit to sell to the end. It's just missing the whole point of who actually pays the bills, which is people like myself that buy, my wife's like $10,000, $15,000 of cigars a year. And we're talking huge amounts of money, not a couple dollars. And I want brands to be successful. I don't think retailers that don't oftentimes do the work of promote. I mean, I'm sure you do a lot but I want the money to go to brand owners and salespeople who are actually delivering the value and doing the work. I don't want some guy that just, has a shop because he used to have to buy things in person before the internet and before, I guess, mail catalog. I just, there's just this I hate protectionism in all forms. It's wrong. It is just economics 101 wrong. And we just lose economics 101 in some of these discussions because people have interests. And a lot of them are, quite frankly, brick and mortar retailers that are coming on and they've got skin in the game. And they're being disingenuous when they're talking about some of the price differences. And I just don't think there's a real discussion about that. And I don't think it's necessarily, this is fun. I'll be done, ran over. But it bothers me when people act like online or innovative forces that can save people money and be done. Corona's a great online, they do both. But they're not the bad guys. And I think they get unfairly maligned. And a lot of times it's for people that are just have their own interests. And I want the money of the hard-earned money consumers to go to the brand owners, the people that make the product happen, ultimately workers, not to dead weight loss.
So
Vlad,
I understand
I
where
let you
you're.
go first, and I'd like everyone else who has a take on this to jump in after Vlad. Basically, this is a great thought, a great perspective. I'm not sure if everyone agrees. So, Vlad, what's your take here, and everybody else after, please?
So I understand where you're coming from, and I think a friend of mine who actually owns a retail store nailed this. And his description was very simple. There's two types of stores. There's a U-Haul storage unit with 5 cigars sitting in there where you can buy cigars, and there's a lounge. A lounge provides an experience, and people think they're in the in the cigar industry. They're not. They're in the hospitality industry, which has been the number one thing trying to get into people's heads. You are in the hospitality industry, and depending on how you treat people, people will pay the difference to support the small local business, provided you're taking care of them. I think the best way to run this, because the state taxes vary so highly in the US, where it goes from 0 to 80 or 97%, is to put a flat cap across everything, even out the playing field for everybody. States that have instituted a 50 cents cap have profited because they collect the sales tax, right, locally. The shops get more business, provided they deserve to be in business. This is capitalism. If you do a shitty job and consistently make people unhappy, and you're charging more than for the same thing they can get online, you don't deserve to be in business. You have not taken care of the people. The internet is not a bad thing, and the online retailers are not. What I do find somewhat disingenuous, but this comes down to the brand owners, where if they say a cigar costs 10 and an online retailer sells it for 6 and they don't say anything, they are hypocrites. Because the majority of my time for year in, year out is me checking other people's websites and bugging them about keeping the leveling playing field. Because if someone's in California and they have 67% taxes, even with my distribution license, that cigar is going to be $3 to $5 more expensive than what the MSRP is.
So, Vlad, what are you going to do if you have a bunch of stock of a product that's said to be 10, and your warehouse is already reaching the capacity? You need to get rid of it. You need to charge 6. What do you tell those guys?
So again, the way it works, and a good friend of mine told me this sentence. He said, you don't make money when you sell, you make money when you buy. Right? So the wholesale in a $10 cigar would be $5. So if you have a ton of it and you sell it at a 20% discount, instead of making 10, right, where you make $6, you might sell it for 8, which is fine, right? And I treat this, right, the discounting on box purchases and stuff like that. People always gripe about this, and my response is the same. Do you have a locker? Do you have lockers in your lounge? They go, yes. Do your members get discounts on boxes or as locker members? The answer is usually yes. So I go, okay, what is the problem if an online website runs points or whatever, runs 15% off, which as a retailer, you probably extend it to some of your customers. The problem is when you have $100, let's say a box is $100 and it's being sold for $45 or $60. Again, if a brand doesn't really care, why does it cost $10 to begin with? Because you want to make the extra money. If you think $6 is the right price, why don't you sell it for 3 instead of 5? If I say something costs $13, I am comparing it to every other $13 cigar that I've smoked that I think this fits in the portfolio and will actually be worth it. Price to quality ratio, right? You're going to have a $13 plus experience because I think you should always over deliver. That's what keeps people coming back. That's what keeps me coming back. I'm inside of a lounge in Fuego, and Shar, the owner, just stepped in. I have a rotation that I continually continually smoke here because this is the best cigar in his humidor at that certain price point for my particular palate. And again, the reason why I patronize this lounge versus the one that sells stuff for $3 cheaper is because I like the people here. I like Shar as an owner. I like the actual surroundings. It's clean. It's taken care of. Everything about it feels like someone cares. Instead, I could have just bought it off small batch, who I think do about as close to a online lounge experience that you can get. I think they have some of the best service along with Luxury Cigar Club. Corona's fantastic, obviously. I think Sir Louis Hunter in Massachusetts does a phenomenal thing. He did a groundbreaking thing. I've never seen anything like it. He does these lives where you can join in, you can jump, but you can have a video call and he'll walk you through the humidor. He is taking you through his lounge virtually. The future is now, people. And then when you buy from him, what was the difference? If you're going to smoke it on the porch, great. Anyway,
I mean, there's a point
is,
to be made for the cigar experience in the store, and I think Davidoff is pretty consistent across their shops. You were mentioning New York earlier. Yeah, I think they probably got 4 or 5 in Manhattan only, and they're all pretty much the same, consistent. Not that I like the atmosphere personally a lot, but I think there's, that tastes are different. But that point is to be made, wouldn't you agree? That the experience by the operator, be the lounge owner or the brick and mortar operator, is an argument to sell at a potentially higher price.
100%. Obviously, your surroundings, the same cigar, or let's move away from cigars. The same beer on the strip costs $12 that costs $2 in the supermarket versus $8 on the airport. Same thing, same beer, same product, same everything. One is because of your captured audience, i.e. the airport. One is because of the experience, the Las Vegas Strip, right? So you're going to pay $12 for the 75 cents can of beer. It's just combination. And then you can buy it for $2 in your local liquor store. And again, it varies a lot more in what's called off-premise and on-premise, right? Like your actual sit-down restaurants versus your liquor stores. And I know lounges in this town that charge more because of their location, their surroundings, their experience. And if people are willing to pay for it, 100% behind it, but you need to justify it. If you're expensive for the sake of being expensive, I think that's a very short runway off an island into the sea.
So who is complaining, if anyone at all? Macy, maybe this was the point where you're coming from. Do we feel like retailers are complaining that online shops are driving the price down, or are they just not doing a good enough job?
There are ways that lounges that just don't want to put in the effort. I think a lot of lounges could use more or spend more time on creating a better experience, whatever that experience may be, right? If your whole setup is...
What's your take there? I'd be curious to know, as you're from hospitality, there is, and Reinhard is certainly a preacher of this as well. The experience and what you can achieve is like, it's limitless almost.
100%. I always make this joke. You walk into a store, there's 2 to 4 guys sitting there, and their response is, "Humidor is over there, bro. Let me know if you need anything." If I called out anybody, you're probably supposed to be called out on this. You have someone coming into your store, your place of business, and you're working in the hospitality setting. Why is your response, "Hey, welcome. How are you doing today? Let's walk through this. Are you looking for anything in particular?" Get excited. Ask them a couple of things. The sales thing was always the same. And I worked in a retail store as well. I've helped a very good friend of mine. And his whole take was, someone walks in. He's also a master salesman, absolute master. If someone walks in and says they want to buy 1 cigar, I failed if I don't sell him 3. And it doesn't mean he's going to overcharge you. He's going to find ways to upsell and create a great experience for the person. And hopefully that person comes back because you live off repeat business. And again, if you're making people happy, they will pay that little upcharge. They will come to the lounge and enjoy a cup of coffee and a cigar because they feel good about it. Or they might just walk in and walk out, right? But if that's your business model, I know plenty of lounges that are just cash and carry, and they do a phenomenal job. But guess what? You might not stick around in his lounge because he has 4 chairs, but his service is incredible. He enjoys tequila, bourbon. Again, it's a state where you can do stuff like that. He's like, hey, everybody who comes in, we're sharing something with you. Hey, I brought bagels. There was a lounge and I walked in. He didn't do it because I was there. He just does it. 4 guys sitting in the lounge. He goes, hey guys. And again, I've never seen these people before. I've been to the lounge a bunch of times. He said they're just not his regulars. You've seen him once or twice. He's like, hey, I'm ordering sandwiches from next door. What would you guys like? Completely unrelated to the cigars. Completely unrelated. And if out of those 4 or 5 guys that were there, they didn't come back, I'd be really surprised. Because that's a nice little step. Yeah, I have to buy him sandwiches. Who cares? $15. Like, nobody really cares about that. But it's the service. It's the caring. You have to show that you care. And a good lounge will do that. It will make you feel like it's a second home, like a second spot, right? Something where you're comfortable. And if they do that, you will let things go often, right? Like no different than your favorite restaurant. You go there all the time. They take care of you. Yeah, the steak was salty or overcooked one time. Who cares? It happens, right? You'll let it go. And you'll probably pay the full price and won't complain because you know what? It happens. But if you have a bad experience and you paid through the nose for it, you probably will never come back.
I see Ray here with a New York cap, if I'm not mistaken. And I'd be curious to hear Ray's take on this. What's your approach in the UK, obviously, on the retail side? I like Vlada's mentioning if a customer comes in and wants to buy 1 stick, he's unhappy if he buys less than 3. Have you tried something similar? Ray, could you hear me? Or are you
I didn't get it for me.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your take on it. How do you do it? You know, the customer experience, obviously in the UK, maybe a little different culture. Do you also try to sell 3 sticks if the customer only wanted 1?
Not really, to be honest. But again, it's if you want cigar, it's very rarely can, especially in UK, the prices are ridiculous. You know, 1 decent, let's say Robusto, is £25. So how you can make someone spend £90 instead of 25? It's not that easy. You know, there's no such a thing as a $6 cigar or $8 cigar or something like that. No such a thing in UK.
That does become a bigger issue, right? Because the US is very cigar friendly and you can really find it. Now it's a little bit harder. And I'm talking about brick and mortar prices, right? But you can find great cigars in the $8 to $10, $12 price point, even with 30% taxes, like Nevada, for example. So I get where it comes from. It's a lot more egalitarian, let's call it that, in the US. It's a lot more widespread. And I would say that the main difference, and this might come off, I would say that cigar smoking in Europe is definitely more akin to an elite sport. And you guys feel free to disagree with me. This is my experience based on, right, growing up in Serbia and like the La Casa de Labanos, right? It's for your middle upper class and upper class. Really, you can't go and find a $5 cigar. Maybe now you can in Europe, but the taxes really make it prohibitive. And again, for $5, you're really mostly going to get machine-made stuff, maybe some of the lower end stuff from Honduras, but right, you can get a great premium cigar. I mean, the Illusione, which we mentioned earlier, to me, that has always been the benchmark for what's a phenomenal, and I still don't think I have anything in my portfolio that over delivers as much as an Illusione Grand Class Rex. I believe it's 525 or 550 for a Petit Corona, and I routinely smoke for a bundle of 25. Long leaf, handmade, incredibly well done. It's the greatest thing. Yeah, so that's right, Andre. I should probably describe that. It sounds like I'm overselling it. I'm not. I'm more like guiding people to have a good experience, right? Mostly because, hey, they're here and I might not see them again. So it's like, hey, what are you looking for? This, and this. What do you like about it? I always go with, what do you enjoy doing? And I'll make these comparisons because a lot of people just don't understand what they like about some cigars. And that's fair. A lot of people don't understand and don't have a very good understanding of their palate, right? Or don't even remember what the cigars are, honestly. Yeah, I have a working Rolodex because I have the ADHD. So for me, it's easy. But for most people, like, oh, it had, numbers on the band. Okay, you narrowed it down to 67 brands. But I always make this comparison, be like, hey, if you could have chicken, steak, or fish right now, what would you like? Right? And big guys, you usually go steak. I'm like, great. Would you care for a fillet, a skirt steak, or a ribeye? And depending on their answer, it narrows it down, with the fillet being medium, right? Flavorful, but medium, right? More on the creamier side, with skirt steak being medium to full, and then ribeye being full, right? Your fattiness. And most people either go for fillet or ribeye. Some of the people go for skirt steak, but that puts me at least in there. What kind of an experience are they looking for? They're looking for a full flavored cigar, not necessarily full bodied one, right? Like not full from a strength point. And when I say full bodied, I do mean, or full strength rather, from a nicotine strength standpoint, I do mean body, right? Like your actual impact, the weight, under quotes, of smoke, right? Your actual impact on the palate. So I kind of narrow it down. And again, if they're like, I had a guy go, I'm a vegetarian. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like if you could have cauliflower steak, fried rice, or, a salad, like what would you pick? And he goes, well, what kind of salad? I'm like, all right, seriously? But again, you can make this comparison and
Yes.
I can do that easily because I have a working knowledge of all these things, right? Like beer, wine, spirits, whatever. And it can be like, cool, man, what kind of beer do you like? Oh, I like double IPAs.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So you're not afraid of forward flavor experiences. Cool. Like we can give you a full flavored cigar.
A question here, or maybe a take from Brian. Hello to Los Angeles.
Hello. Sunny Los Angeles is raining. We have a rain all over the whole West Coast right now. But, this is how much I love you guys. This is what I do. I'm sitting out in the rain because this is my dedication level. I'm really enjoying this conversation. This is fascinating. A lot of the stuff is over my head in terms of like retailers and direct to customers and stuff. But in terms of customer service, I've had a lot of really terrible jobs in my life, and I understand giving the customer an experience. I've had all different kinds of experiences in LA in regards to that, and there is a huge difference in a lounge. Like shout out to Joey. There's this place in Encino that I used to go to, and now I'm a little too far away. Shout out to Joey's. I was much younger at the time. I would go in there, and I felt welcomed. And I did, a lot of times, I don't know. Lately, I feel like the shops around where I live in my neighborhood now, I go in, and I feel like I look wrong to be there.
Brian, which area do you live in?
Well, it's technically a Burbank address, but we tell people Toluca Lake because it sounds a little fancier.
I used to live in Studio City. So
there you go.
If you don't mind,
it counts.
So here's a couple of good stores. There's one on Lancashire. It's Cigar Sanctuary.
I've been there.
So I've had great experiences there, and when I lived there, I would usually use that as my go-to. Cigars by Shivas in Pasadena with Anto,
Okay.
whose service is unmatched. And then you have Glendora, and if you ever go out that way, Glendora, you have Marty's Cigar Shop with Woody. Phenomenal service. They do make you feel like instantly welcome. and the lounges have a sense of filtering out. Each lounge has its own little microcosm, and they're pretty protective about their system. And you can feel if you're welcome or not as soon as you kind of step in. And a good lounge
Yeah.
will be welcoming to all as long as you abide by the house rules.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. I mean, I think there's a certain etiquette that goes along with it, which is great. But sometimes I get the impression that I think they think I'm gonna steal. Like I don't. I mean, I don't dress like I don't look homeless, but like I'm not wearing. I don't wear Armani. Like I don't have a Rolex. So I think there's a difference between like the stereotypical idea of what is a cigar smoker and the reality. And in my mind, when I was younger, I had always kind of imagined it's like, oh, fancy gangsters and nice suits and then this lounge really opened me up to like this whole other world of what the whole family and world of cigars is, and it's really lovely and beautiful. It's not to say that people don't have style. Like Michael Herzog has the best style of all, but he's like such a wonderful person when you talk to him at the same time. And so sometimes I feel like I go into these shops and I feel like I have to prove myself and say enough things about cigars and cigar brands to prove because they'll want to come with me into the humidor, but I'm feeling like it's not, I don't know. You want to make sure I'm not stealing. It's weird.
So that you also mentioned the portion, right? Like where people don't like to be shadowed in a humidor. So you always preface that, be like, hey, step into the humidor, like, let's find, are you looking for anything in particular, right? You offer the customer an option. How much engagement do they want? Because honestly, so here's an experience I had in Texas. So I took a overnight flight. I landed at 9:30 or 10 a.m. in the morning. My buddy picks me up. We go to this lounge and I walk in, and the lounge has a couple of Ligas, couple of Fuentes, a little bit of Padron, some Opuses. So I go, this is 2017, I want to say 2016, 2017. So mind you, at this point, I haven't had dinner. I haven't had breakfast. We met up early to have a coffee, and I go, hey man, this is what I usually smoke. So I list off a bunch of Davidoffs, Opus, things like that. Hey, I also enjoy Lucione, blah, 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 blah. I'm looking for a light to medium creamy smoke, something in the vein of Avo XO. I haven't had breakfast and I'd like a coffee. He goes, we just got a great cigar, just came in. Like, cool, what is it? The Damaso from Padron. I'm like, I've had it before, I'm maybe something not really feeling that right now. He goes, oh, I actually have something even lighter. The 90th in natural from Padron, which is, there is no planet that is a light to medium cigar. So again, at this point, I haven't eaten for 14 hours. I've had a long ass flight, and my morning cigar is a gut punch, which again, very obviously never been back and never worked with the guy again, but like that is a very bad recommendation, right? And he just complete lack of misunderstanding and understanding of like what your humidor has.
Yeah.
And lack of knowledge because you as a store owner might have a preference, but your job is to sell everything you have on the shelves and have a working knowledge of everything that's on your shelves. This is, if you want to be a good salesman, you have to have a working knowledge and understanding of all your products. And that was not it. So
yeah, we come back to
sorry,
your initial point of the cigar experience in the shop, and to justify a potentially higher price by knowing that stuff. And I want to tap into one other questions I got down here, and I'm very curious to hear when you were talking about the different bodies as well as different price ranges. How does your portfolio mix look like roughly? And how many brands? Do you have a certain rule, a sweet spot where you like to operate?
So no, ultimately brands will, right, they'll sell at a certain point. I'll put it through my system and make sure that with my markup it works. Right, the issues come out with when the cigars are not worth it. that's what happened with the brands that I haven't managed to like get off. And there have been one or two misses. But Stefan's here, so I'll highlight him, for example. His cigars all live in this, and I'm talking Robustos and Toros, in this $12 to $15 range. And Stefan has been very agile. He listens to the feedback. There have been continuous updates on the packaging, right? The first run, for example, didn't have cellos. So we added cellos, very simple. Then we added all the barcodes. Then we updated the boxes. Now there's shelf talkers built into like the actual brand breakdown of every box. We've lowered the number of cigar box counts, right, from 20 to 10, which is a very risky maneuver. And I've done a lot of research. I've probably spent about six to 7 months of just talking and researching on which brands have done this. How did they handle it? How did they do it? And a Lampert stuff lives in this $12 to $15 range and does incredibly well because the cigar over delivers for the money. His consistency is key. His message is unified, and he has consistently worked on delivering an experience from point A, from the factory to him, to me, to the retailer, to the consumer. Right? That's what makes a good brand, because ultimately, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It might just not be a good cigar at that price point.
Yeah.
Right. It's
so
just,
if Macy sometime in the future will come up with a cigar brand, you mentioned it's got to be consistent. It's got to work out in terms of the unit economics. It's got to be in a sensible price range. Any other points that come to mind
it doesn't
Macy
have to be
should take into account?
It doesn't have to be a sensible price point. And we'll use our good friend Reinhard, right? The Mirafels just came out with a cigar that costs $85 or 85 euros for a Robusto, extended Robustos.
That's why you sent all 4 of them.
And it's not going to be in every shop, and it shouldn't be in every shop. They decided to make a Rolls Royce. Well, you only sell X amount of Rolls Royces a year, but your Honda Civics probably sell millions, if not tens of millions a year. So figure out what you want to be. Do you want to be the Honda Civic of the world, which is a pretty crowded market, or do you want to be the Rolls Royce of the world? But if there's only one Rolls Royce, and in the Rolls Royce price category, if you go for the king, you better not miss. So your options are Davidoff, Opus, Padron, Byron, and Atabey in that $30 to $50 range. It's a very, very tough. El Septimo, I guess. Very, very tough market to break into, but your quality control has to be impeccable.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider yourself in the premium car market, or do you offer everything?
So Judgy Bobby, who makes boxes and is an incredible person. I love the man to death. He has decided all of his cigars are going to be $5.50 to $8. He just came out with the first $10 cigar, which is a Lancero 7x42. He decided he is going to be the Nissan Versa. That being said, you buy a Nissan Versa, it still works, right? From every imaginable thing. It's a car. It gets you from point A to point B safely. Yeah, it might not have the looks, and you're probably not going to get as much response as you would for a Rolls Royce, but that's what he decided, and that's his story. And he does it incredibly well. Stefan decided to be in the medium price point. I honestly think $12 to $15 is a medium price point now, because there has been a price creep. This is the old $8 to $10 range that used to be the most competitive for the last 5 or so years. Then you have Castagli, which when it originally launched, it was in its sweet spot between Avo and Davidoff, which I think was the perfect spot. It delivered Davidoff-esque qualities at a price point that's slightly lower, but the prices have crept up over the years for a variety of other reasons. And the only other way to make them come down is to cut out the distributor and basically go direct to consumer or retailer. There is no other way to do it. That's basically what it does. So to make this comparison, this would be Mercedes adopting a Tesla model, right? To make this comparison. So I also have a couple other brands, and for example, Casa 1910. I think they have done an incredible job, and I'm handling the sales for them, or at least a portion with our broker team. They have committed to making a Mexican tobacco-centric cigar. The branding is absolutely incredible. The orange boxes look like something out of Hermes. Every box looks incredible. There's care. You put a bowl in a pack, probably don't even need it in those particular boxes because of how fast they sell. They've committed to using and highlighting Mexican tobaccos, which everybody else uses, but nobody has really figured out how to make something that's going to be at this luxury level. And I'll make this comparison with the spirits world, right? Who revolutionized vodka and made it a premium spirit? Grey Goose. Grey Goose took vodka and teleported it into the premium segment, right? For the longest time, it was the most expensive, like 30, 40 bucks. Now you have so many different competitors. Patron did the same thing for tequila. They made something premium, and it's going to take 5 to 10 years to like establish it, but they're doing the things right. They are incredibly quality conscious, and they're trying to push it. So that would definitely be in this, mid to upper class market, right? This would be your BMW, Audi, and say, Genesis, right? Like that would be the market, right? So they are going to be.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Stefan here if you can speak. Vlada was talking about the medium price point, how he classified it. I assume you would agree. What's your take on the where to position yourself in that segment? Oh, I think his connection just broke off right on time. Maybe he'll come back in a minute.
On that note, even though it does have, right? So let's again go back to the car comparison.
Yeah.
Genesis is Hyundai, right? Like Hyundai Genesis? Yeah, I think that's it, right? So they have a medium segment cigar that's going to be their bread and butter, but they also have a higher end stuff, which is worth the price. And the reasoning is when you go to someone and say, hey, this same cigar that costs $15 that's from the same producer, right? You live in this range. Why is this limited edition $20? Or why is this limited edition $30? Very simple. It's a one-off blend. It's aged for a year. It's in a 10-count box. It's made in a run of 5,000 cigars. It's super limited and only goes to select shops. This is why we've put extra care on top of everything. All the other care we put into it, we've put more. The Family Reserve, which we did out of Kellner Boutique Factory, one of the most elite factories in the world, super tiny, small production. Again, why did that cigar cost $16 and most of the other stuff, $16 or $18, whatever it was, and everything else is, 12 to 14? Well, because it's made at an elite factory, because we used the Kume wood, because we aged it, because we made it so limited, and that all 5,000 of them sold within 48 hours.
If you look at the very premium, the even luxury brands, Miracle, you just mentioned it, and you look at the current times, potential recession looming, potentially globally, do you see that upper part of the range being affected? Do you see the entire range being affected, or quite the contrary? Because we've seen brands like LVMH to actually perform really well in those uncertain times. So maybe your take here on the cigar, the prices and the development over the next years, if there is a recession coming.
So one thing that I think that's not going to happen is the prices won't come down. I think that the upper segment, right? Your Padrones, your Davidoffs, your Atabays, etc. I think that will do very well for one simple reason. Their target market is much smaller and it's a wealthy target market. I think where your struggle is going to be in your $5 to $8 range. That's where your struggle is going to be. 12 to 15 might take a hit, but if you start over delivering in that range, people will spend an extra $2, $3 to have an enjoyable experience. I think that's going to be okay. I think the lower end is going to suffer. The medium is probably going to suffer a little bit. I don't think the high end is going to be really affected too much, precisely because in a recession, as weird as it sounds, right? Like, what did LVMH do during Corona? Their shop experiences, right, which they were extremely obsessive about, they went online, and their sales, 28 or 30% of their revenue was online sales, which means no brick and mortar, right? Like no rent, zero. I don't want to say zero overhead because it was already built in. They probably shipped it out of their warehouses. So again, their price has gone stratospheric. Look at Gucci. Gucci raised prices 3 times in 1 year. The same bag that cost whatever it was, $800-900 now costs $1,600, and they're still getting.
I'm not sure if you're a fan of the Remova suitcases. So I just love the brand. I'm German. Maybe that's a thing because it's a German brand. But there's the small Remova case that like 5 years ago was insane, at like 800 euros. And I looked it up the other day. It's 1,500, like a small suitcase. Are you kidding me? But you know, they must have done the math. You know, I would consider that a very premium suitcase. And as you know, someone like I I do travel a lot. They just have a great customer service, better than some of the medium price segment suitcases. But Remova did exactly the same thing.
Exactly, and at that higher price point, right? Aside from the actual experience, right? There's also the recognition portion of it. And then, yeah, the Remova thing is a great example because if I'm not mistaken, it was acquired by LVMH, a decade or so ago, and then they built it. The other example is RM Williams boots, right? Whole cut boots out of Australia. They were acquired by LVMH, and boots that used to cost, I think it was like $350 or $425 for one of the models that they had, now costs $600 or $650. And again, same thing. They just did it the right way. They didn't change anything to make it simpler. Everybody's seen Topo Chico, right? Like if you're in the States, you've seen Topo Chico explode. Topo Chico was a tiny little thing that started growing, and I had to buy it off Amazon for a restaurant I used to work because we used it in our cocktails. We made ranch water, which is tequila, soda, lime. But the key was Topo Chico. Well, guess what? Coca-Cola acquired it. It wasn't really spoken. You don't really see it anymore. But guess what? Coca-Cola acquired it, just put it in the distribution portfolio, and that business has probably paid itself 5 times over in the last 3 or 4 years. Right? So you build it and you keep delivering. The Remova stuff is exceptional. Luxury suitcase. Honestly, I travel a lot. I use a Samsonite because I snagged an incredible deal. For me, growing up, Samsonite was always the top line. My parents used it. My grandparents used it. Exceptional brand, right? And their follow-up service is great. I've had it for about probably 2 years. It looks like it's been through Second World War, Korean War, and then the Balkan Wars as well. Like that's what it looks like. It's been absolutely destroyed. And then I talked to my friends who work for airlines. They're like, get the Travel Pro or whatever it is. It's like $400 or $500, but it's indestructible. It's what all the flight attendants use. Flight attendants and pilots, right? So the other thing is when you have a Remova suitcase, what you're also signaling, aside from the fact that it's an incredible product, is I can drop $1,500 on a suitcase, right? No different reason than like, why are you smoking an Atabey apart from the fact that it delivers an incredible, consistent experience, or a Davidoff or whatever it is, right? Like you also want to be like, hey man, I am burning $30 worth right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The cigar experience as well as the travel experience does sometimes also just come by the brand, the band, the logo, the feel good. Hey, I'm treating myself, and it's just part of it. It's hard to deny. I totally get it, and I would agree with Macy here. Why spend so much money on a premium suitcase? It does probably not make a lot of sense. You know, it's probably in the pricier range, but the same goes for Apple or other premium products. You just pay premium for some good, feel good factor. Yeah,
And if
totally
I can,
agree.
like, absolutely, right? Look at what Habanos has done, for example. They've increased their prices, what, by 400% over the last 2 years?
In Austria, 300%. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people got upset over this, and I might have a different take than most other people. If you truly are making the Rolls Royce of the Cuban cigar world, I, as a student, broke ass student in Serbia, shouldn't be able to walk into my local Casa de Habanos, right? This is 2015, and buy a Behike for $50 or $30 or whatever it was. I should have never been able to afford that unless I was willing to forego rent next month. Because Rolls-Royce doesn't target market to me, because I'm not Rolls-Royce's customer. If you really are making the Rolls-Royce of the cigar world, it should be good. And a definition of a Veblen good is just, it's stupidly expensive because people will buy it. And there is a very distinct correlation, and countless studies have been done, that people enjoy more expensive stuff if their enjoyment increases if they know the price, which is silly, right? Because ultimately it's about the experience they deliver. But again, the price does come into the enjoyment, right? Like, is a Rolex worth more than a G-Shock? Is it worth 700 times more? No, it's more imprecise. But guess what? Crown is the best. The Rolex Crown is the most admired and best known brand. It signifies you've made it, right? You managed to drop $5,000 or $10,000 on a mechanical watch that doesn't keep better time than your phone, and we all have our phones.
Mhm.
So
Speaking
again,
of the Habanos price increase, I think there was actually a dedicated show of Reinhard here on the Zoom Lounge about this topic. Do you think it does hurt them in the long term? I mean, the price increase is that steep, or do you think, oh well, there's just such a shortage, they will just get over it and they'll be better off? I mean, it's probably too early to tell. It's just like probably half a year, maybe a year ago since they did it.
I think because they don't have enough supply, it won't hurt them in the long run. And the calculation is simple. If they could have sold, let's use Behike for example. If they could have sold it at $50, they could have sold 1,000 or 100, just to make numbers simple. Now they're selling it at $300. So they're, and even if they're making a smaller amount, they're making more money. The Habanos, and I don't understand why this works, because the way they've done it is foreign to me, because they've clearly not reacted to what the New World cigars, right? The Davidoff Fuente and all the other brands have done in Europe, right? There has been a market, like very noticeable increase in New World cigars, i.e. everything that's not Cuba, in Europe, right? And it used to be probably 90% Cuban. Now it's probably what, 60? 60-40, 70-30. I'll use Serbia as an example. It's a tiny country. They only do maybe 500,000, or they used to do 500,000 cigars in 2019 for the whole country, right? To give you an idea, that there's probably a shop in the United States that does more than that on a quarterly basis. So that market used to be completely dominated by Cubans and a little bit of Davidoff and Fuente. Now you have everything you can find in a well-stocked humidor in the United States. Yeah, there might not be a lot of smaller boutique brands because of the issues of actually getting the stuff registered and stuff like that. Europe is a lot more difficult to do business in than the US. But you have Plasencia, you have Gurkha, there's, I don't know if Aganorsa is present. Casa 1910 is present in Serbia or will be. Stefan should be there soon. I mean, it's just, you know, all these Nicaraguan, Mexican, like, when's the last time you heard of a Mexican cigar being present in a European market that isn't Tam or Casa Trent? And again, the reason why you should pay more for a Casa 1910 versus, say, Casa Trent or Tamo is their overall story, right? Like, they're selling the story that this is what we're doing. We're doing premium cigars. Everything does rest for 6 months before it's being released. They're very transparent on their blends. The Tierra Blanca, for example, which is all San Andres Maduro. To my knowledge, I don't know if anybody's made that blend before, but it's all aged for 5 years. It's all wrapper, binder, filler from 2017. Right. So there's definitely I don't, the actual answer, Macy, the question was, do they use Mexican leaf from non-Trent farms? The actual answer is, I don't know. That's a master blender Manolo question. But ultimately, I think the Cubans are losing their market share due to lack of supply. They have been very smart in building the La Casa del Habano portfolio and network, where they basically lock you into buying just stuff from them. As to how well that's going to work, I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball. If I was in charge of the Habanos portfolio, I would probably release $1,000 Bejique. And I guarantee it would sell out instantly.
When was the last time you had a Bejique? Or do you have one in your humidor right now?
Years. No, I've not the last Cuban cigar I've had, or that I've actually purchased, was for my dad last year when I was in Serbia. I bought 4 double Coronas, Olla de Monterrey, one of my favorite cigars of all time. 2 of them were completely unsmokable, even after using the perfect draw. And I get that people always complain like, oh, Cubans draw this really was. I dry boxed the other 2. They were a little bit better, but still required quite a bit of work on using the perfect draw, right? So again, my experience after dropping 120 euros, I enjoyed it for the nostalgia of it. As to whether I enjoy the cigar, no, I enjoy the fact that I smoked it with my dad. We were talking, we were having a great time. But as far as a $25, $35 experience, whatever it was so far removed from that it's just no. And again,
I'd like
the lack
to-
of go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just reading the last question here.
And yeah, I mean, it's just I don't know. So I don't know what holds for the Cuban portfolio, but I definitely believe that the price creep will keep going up as long as people are willing to pay. And you have to look at the macroeconomics as well, right? Like, you have all these emerging countries, and what do emerging countries do when they get a little bit of money, right? They go for the status symbols of the old money, right? And what's more elitist in old money than putting tobacco leaves on fire, burning a couple of $100?
Yeah.
So again,
Well, I just read this last question here, Ahrefs iPhone, about if a Civic brand could pull off a Mercedes cigar, or if the brand is an obstacle to it. My take here is very much an obstacle, as you're probably better off in a brand split, or just release something new, something limited, something special to justify the price increase, even though you may have put in the work. That may be very well true. That product may be better, but you will suffer from that brand that will dilute probably some of that value. Would you agree, Vlada,
Correct.
or what's your take here?
correct. Which brings us back to Geometro. I think that's a, but only if it's like a 1987. I think that would compare to, yes, there's obviously obstacles when you're used to making Civics and you release something priced as a Mercedes. There's obviously obstacles. So it's an upward slope versus starting at the top and then making the stuff more approachable, right? You make your offshoots.
I'd like to ask Stefan here if he has try to release a Mercedes after a Civic or vice versa. I guess we're talking about the Mercedes and going to a Civic. Stefan, if you can talk, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Yeah. So how are you guys? Yeah. So yes, we release it every year. As Vlada knows, we have the Golden Retailer program. That's our Mercedes on the field that we are releasing. I think Vlada he can tell a little bit more about our program in the United States where we get their Mercedes on the road.
100%. So with the Golden Retailer program, that kind of came up last year, and I basically grabbed cigars that Stefan was using for his shop exclusives in Europe. So we brought a limited amount over, right? And again, Swiss, you're playing in Davidoff's background. So if you are trying to charge Davidoff-esque prices, it's got to smoke the part. So again, this was aged for a year before release. The deal for that is one-off blends, always limited runs, extensively aged and unique. And again, that it's never going to match sales volume wise. It's never going to match what we do with, the Honda Civics of the world. But you need to upgrade. You need to offer that option, because if people are already brand loyal, they might give it a shot. And a lot of people like it. Plus, you're attacking a different consumer price point at that point. You're going for a different consumer. The only question is, how do you get it into that consumer's hands?
Are we talking about this $12 price point?
Yeah. So if you go, the Golden Retailers cost, they were both Salomon sizes, 2021 and 2022. Both Salomon sizes. The 2021 was 3-year age Ecuadorian Connecticut, 5-year binder, and 7-year-old filler. Undisclosed, and we'll just leave a European exclusive. Aged for a year, right? And then 2022 was Ecuadorian Habano, Nicaraguan binder, and 3 Nicaraguan fillers, aged for 3, 5, and 7. The binder was 5, and the wrapper was 3. So extensively aged tobacco, and then aged for an extra year, and then released in 2 subsequent small runs. So there is a little bit of that fear of missing out, because once they're sold, they're sold. We're never making it again. And you just have to build it the right way. You have to not market, maybe isn't really the right way. It has to make sense, both from a brand story that we're trying to tell. And when you do try to go for that higher price point, the proof has to be in the pudding. You have to be able to justify why this costs more. And the return rate on people who do try those cigars is very high, which means that we do have a good product and it's at a good price point. Now, if you release it and then it sits for 9 months, then you miss something, whether it's the cigar, whether you overestimated it, you didn't do something, or maybe you didn't market it right. There's plenty of phenomenal cigars that haven't gotten traction just because people didn't get it into people's hands. The Azul Lampert, I believe, is an incredible cigar, and it got 93 from Cigar Journal, as well as 2 94 points literally in the same week. 93 points. Andre, I think. Oh, Andre's still there. I mean, Andre, how many 93 points have we rated in the last 5 years? 5 cigars? 6 cigars? So maybe Andre's got 1. So
He's saying more, I think.
Oh, more? More than that? Cigars that have, all right, maybe. I know it's a very small percentage.
So here we're talking about north of the median price segment.
No, funnily enough, that's $12 MSRP.
Gotcha.
And then, right, the Limitada, for example, the 2021, on a couple of the cigar bloggers and reviewers, they rated as their best, best cigar of 2022 that they've smoked, they've personally enjoyed. They believe it's worth the price point.
Gotcha.
The accolades are great, but I truly believe in that blend, and it has done an incredible.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to go up and down. So if you had to release a Mercedes first or Civic first and then go to Mercedes price point, I would do it the opposite. You start high and then you offer a similar experience at a lower price point. A good friend of mine, Jonathan from J London, has done something like that. His high end, the Golden Series, is Davidoff-esque in pricing, probably, 20, $25 usually, maybe more on some of the cigars. And then his new releases are in this $10 to $14 range. And they still offer the same care, the same approach, very different profiles. And for a customer base that he might necessarily not target with Golden Series, but a lot more approachable. And the idea is, if your bread and butter is at the top, the idea is get these consumers that may not want to spend 25, $30 on something they never heard of. Maybe have deliver a lot of value in your Honda Civic market, right? Your $12 to $15 one, and then have them potentially upgrade at some point or maybe treat themselves. They say, you know what? I've had a great experience. Maybe I'll grab a 5-pack for, $90. Maybe that's a really, or, $120, whatever it is. Like, maybe this is the right fit. But again, you have to be consistent with that message. The quality has to be there.
Vlada, we want to be respectful of your time, and for some of us, just to mention, we're approaching almost 90 minutes here. I do not know, to be honest, if Reinhard is setting a timer on his shows. Usually I stay to the end and it goes a lot longer. So just want to say a big shout out. Thank you so much for being with us.
I'm happy to stay as long as you guys will have me. 100%.
So we will. I do see 1 or 2 more questions. There was one here by Macy, as well as I think Brian. It was about if a 5-year age pre-roll tobacco smoke the same as a 5-year age cigar with 3 years aged pre-roll and 2 years post-roll marrying. You may want to look that question up in the chat yourself.
So I did see it. I want to make sure that I got this right. So the question is, does 5-year age pre-blended tobacco have the same effect as a 5-year post-blend rolled aging cigar? The answer is no. Think of it as components, right? As you combine these components, they age and the oils intermarry, right? Like they're basically working on the inside. The other thing is, obviously there's the ambient side of it, right? Cigars are hygroscopic, if I'm remembering the word that I'm looking for, which means, right, they take stuff out of their ambient surroundings. So if you ever want to test this out, get some sauerkraut, put a cigar next to it, and enjoy a sauerkraut infused cigar. So once you roll it, and between the intermarrying of the various tobacco blends and everything working together, right, like you're obviously going to have a different experience. The other thing is the cigars themselves, when you're smoking single tobaccos, they don't necessarily taste the same they're going to perform in a blend. You're taking ingredients and making a dish. And no better cuisine in the world does this better than Italy, right? They'll take five simple ingredients and make the most divine dish in existence with 3 to 5 ingredients. Olive oil, pasta, tomatoes, and a little bit of garlic, and oh my God, you have an incredible dish. But none of those components on their own taste the same as the final dish.
To your point, and I remember an article Macy and us wrote recently about vintage tobacco or vintage cigars, and Macy, if I recall, you asked Michael Herklotz and Claudius Roy and some others why there's no more vintage cigars, meaning a cigar with tobacco from a certain year. We're not talking about old or aged cigars. And the common take here was the diversity. Sometimes you just have years that are drier, you have certain crops that don't perform as expected, where a cigar with tobacco from a single year would probably not be as diverse, as rich as it could be if you use different types fermented tobaccos over different years.
Correct. Vintage, we have really not done a great job as an industry compared to, say, the wine industry, right? Where you're really, right, each vintage is different, aside from non-vintage champagne, where it's more about the consistency, right? I would compare the cigar industry closer to champagne in terms of making, right? Where you're main focus is maintaining the actual house style. And I'm glad Ian mentioned one of my favorite examples of a vintage cigar, the Mombacho Cosecha. That is a great example because all the tobacco is from one single year. It's all used from there. I believe the farms that they source out of, and it works, right? That's a great example. But again, very limited. They can't keep it. Each year is going to be different. There is quite a bit of aged tobacco used depending on the factories. And it also comes down to what the factory really does or the brand manufacturers make, right? So Hendrik, who I mentioned earlier, has thousands, maybe not thousands of tons, but he has tons of tobacco, literal tons. So the one cigar, the thing that I'm using on my on my cigar is going to be a 25-year-old wrapper from 1997. The binder is from 2007, and all the other fillers are between 3 and 5 years. So just this simple thing alone, it just means that it's limited. For example, he still has access to this 2001 Boneo leaf, which is used on a couple of other cigars. So it's 22 plus years old at this point, and he has enough stock to last him for another, I think, 5 or 7 years.
That's wild.
So, but again, that's his commitment to quality and consistency and everything else. Most, and this isn't a dig at the factories, it's just life, right? Like this is just business. Most factories have some type of tobacco storage, right? Like you look at Plasencia, I'm sure they have stuff going 5, 10, 15 years probably, right? But the majority is used, it's relatively new-ish, right? 2 to 3 year old that you kind of roll and keep going through. I'm sure they have single bales of stuff that's, you know, extremely aged. Mirafils is also a good example, right? The wrapper on that, I believe, is what, 20-something years?
Undisclosed, I hear, in the Cigar Senado interview, at least.
I believe it was, I don't remember who I heard it from, but I believe it is 20 plus years old. And I do believe that, because if anybody has it, they're one of the, you know, biggest growers, or the number one grower for Cameroon, right? Like in traders. So I do believe that they have 20 plus years. What I do kind of question is when someone makes a regular production cigar and claims that it's, you know, 15, 18, 30-year-old tobacco. I have a very hard time believing, because tobacco is not, it's a living thing, right? Like no different than wine. So it changes over time, and at some point it probably overages, right? Like it goes past its peak and it's not worth it. So if you're claiming that you have consistently 30-year-old tobacco in your blends, that it works, you know what? I haven't seen it consistently, you know, aged for 18 years. You put it on the band and then sell a nice story. I don't believe it, especially when the factory's only been around for 10 years.
I can only back this up. My family owns a vineyard here, or wine estate in Austria, and my brother-in-law, he's the master of wine here, and I talked to him about old wines, and I do talk a lot, and sometimes, you know, we bring some old fancy bottles, and he just said he's just the hardest critic, and he just says, you know, there's every wine peaks, and it just doesn't make sense to, you know, what you see on Instagram, like, oh yeah, here I'm having this 1990 whatever Pinot Noir, it's awesome and whatever, and you know, people say that because it's an old wine, it was very expensive, but it has probably been above and beyond the peak. And the same is true with every fermented product. And you got to be, as you said, a trader like Mirafol, growing and being very, very much into it to determine if a product is still at the peak and if you can still sell it. And to be fair, some of the wine we sell, the year later, we don't sell it anymore because it has reached the peak, and now it's, you know, slowly, you know, getting worse. It's still drinkable, of course, but not able to be sold anymore.
100%. It passed its peak where it's the ultimate enjoyment, and cigars are great. The unknown thing with cigars is, right, the storage is a really big thing. No different than wine. I've had 6 bottles of Sassicaia from 2010, and we opened them in 2016 or 2015, one dinner, right? So 5 years old. Same case, sequential serial number, which is because when they're bottled, right? So all came from the same barrel, because there are going to be slight variations, right? Because every barrel will age a little bit different. And you typically won't notice it because the signature is the same, really. But if you have 6 of them side by side, every single bottle was different. And I know the storage conditions were perfect because I know where it was stored. So we opened all 6 of them, and each bottle drank a little bit differently, specifically because what we kind of summarized in the end, their positioning in the wine cellar, those minute differences between the temperature, the humidity, mercury retrograde, I don't even know, but like ultimately those
Yes.
minute differences amplified over 5 years have created some very, very different things. And cigars are the same thing.
Yeah,
I wish I
yeah.
could source Ray's probably the best example here. He smoked more older stuff than probably any of us. My experiences with aged cigars is typically the first change, the secondary flavor transitions, right? Like when you develop a little bit of a patina, happens around the 3-year mark. That's my experience.
Yes.
The second one will typically happen between 5 and 7 years, depending on the cigar and the obvious makeup. The next one is probably 4 to 6, really, but like closer to that 5-6 range. The next, and again, this isn't an exact science. This is based on my personal experience over, a couple of 100 cigars that I've smoked at this certain age. The next one happens between 8 to 10, then 10 to 12. And my experience with 15-plus-year-old cigars is, I could probably count it on maybe under 50, maybe 60. And again, I'm not saying I had a chance to smoke 15 or 20 cigars from the same box, from the same setup, from the same manufacturer, out of a single box, which is very, very rare. This is all like one-offs. For 15-plus-year-old cigars, you're literally playing roulette at that point. So it is a living thing, but the joy of smoking aged cigars or enjoying old wine is you're tasting time. You can't take a bite out of time, but you can drink it. You can light it up. And what you are tasting that is what it was plus the patina of time, which is incredible. And that's where my little romantic thing comes in, where I'm like, oh, time, right? Like I had this beautiful Madeira from 1908, only a couple of hundred boxes, bottles ever made. And if you go back in time and think about it, it is one of the most humbling wine experiences I ever had, because you take into account what happened in 1908. It predates the Model T, predates manned flight, predates World War II, predates widespread electricity and probably indoor plumbing. Like, you take this into account and you take this wine 110 plus years later and you drink it, and it is absolutely incredible. Not only has it not faded, it could probably go for another 100 years.
Interesting.
So you can find, and Ray's probably had a bunch of old cigars. I think the oldest cigar I had was like 1952 Hoyos. And I've actually had like 5 or 6 of them from the shop in Amsterdam. I forget where it was. 2 of them. And Ray, you tell me if I'm off on my tasting notes here.
He's in the humidor right now.
I'll wait for him to come back to give him my tasting notes. So one of them was really, really good. Really good. It came from the same box, same shop, everything. One was really nice. You get the classic Oyo profile. It was dead in the first inch-ish, right? Which typically tends to happen as cigars age sometimes. Ray, you're back. So we're talking about old cigars. My experience with the 4 or 5 Oyo de Monterreys that I had. So one was really exceptional, right? Like classic Oyo profile with the creaminess, a little bit of nuts, almonds, and then cedar, right? Like classic Oyo de Monterrey profile. 2 of them were very muted. And then 2 of them out of the 5 that I smoked two of them, for the lack of a better comparison, smelled like a sweaty armpit after a very tough gym exercise. Have you ever encountered that? Just they aged out, they didn't work out. I don't know what happened. Maybe that box was a little bit closer or away from humidity or whatever. It just wasn't an enjoyable experience, but it still was a 70-year-old cigar at that point.
Well, with the vintage, I love trying vintage stuff, and I always say, even if I give the cigar to someone who never smoked vintage cigars, I always say, don't expect to be the best cigar in your life. You might not be, most likely not be, because something missing on the vintage stuff. You know, I'm talking vintage, for me, it's over 30 years old. And if you smoke even from the same box, I've got boxes behind me, which are, exactly the same box. That's not guaranteed the cigars are actually from the same batch, same peones or anything like that. Because in the factory, there are big pails of cigars, and it might be a little bit different. It's not guaranteed even they're rolled by the same person. So supposed to be the same, but Cuba being Cuba. There's nothing guaranteed there. You might have an exceptional one, might not. The funny thing is, I think I don't know why, I'm not a farmer or anything like that, but I don't know why, but the Cuban tobacco and the vintage Jamaican tobacco age way better than anything else. So I've smoked the oldest non-Cuban cigars, premium cigars I have, Ahoya de Nicaragua. They made from the very first few years when the factory was open in early 70s. Exceptional. The other ones are, you feel that they're not nice, or they're not pleasant, because you don't know how they've been stored as well. That's a fifth.
You're broken off a little bit.
Yeah, my connection is not.
But we got what you were saying. Cuban cigars seem to be all like aging a little better than some of the other stuff you've smoked.
Yes, I tend to think I have a same discussion with Didier Hohenhagel, mostly because Cuban cigars are Cuban puros. Take, for example, other cigar at the moment is not a Nicaraguan puro. There's a few other tobaccos in there that 10 years old, and it's not perfect. Let's say it that way. It's a good cigar, but I've smoked this cigar before, and it was way better.
It's an unknown. There's really no basis into like what really works. Nobody's really done the research or the effort, primarily because It would take an incredible amount of resources, time, and commitment to do something like that. So maybe in another life, but if anybody could do it, I have developed such an incredible appreciation for what Davidoff has done with their limited editions. When you take into account, because I've mentioned earlier that I'm working on this book with Paul Patel, a good friend of mine, and we've smoked basically all the limited editions from 2000 to 2020. All the regionals, everything that Davidoff has made and labeled as limited, we smoked all of them. And when you take into account where they were right in time, when they released this in 2015 or 2007 or 2005 or 2000, what the Davidoff portfolio looked like, what was their flavor profile, what they were working with, you develop, and the fact that across the board, the only cigar that may have kind of been past its peak was a 2000 for the Millennium, the original Millennium Collection limited edition, the first limited edition they did, Corona. From my experience, larger sizes tend to age better. And if I had to go out on a limb, I would say that it's because there's more tobacco and more oils and more things to kind of age than shorter cigars. As for there being a sweet spot, it's kind of like wine. You taste a lot of young, old, and like ready to drink wine, and you develop that skill set where you can kind of taste it and be like, yeah, this is going to be great in 5 years. And what you're really looking for when you say, hey, this is like at its peak, and that peak doesn't last for a day, right? It might be months, might be years. But what you're really looking for is an experience that tastes like a perfect sphere. You will taste, especially freshly released cigars, and I don't mean unaged. I consider stuff that's like 6 months, that's really rested. Rather than like
I would call it
aged.
Cuban
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah. So again, I would consider that a step in quality control, where really when you do taste it, you will feel it's kind of, I don't want to say jagged, but there are things sticking out, right? Like one thing is driving you. One of the most incredible experiences I ever had was a 2005, the original release, the 5-star Davidoff, which I'm blanking on the name. They re-released it a couple of years back, but it was originally Especial, Davidoff Robusto Especial. I've smoked that cigar on my birthday, and I sat there. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember it like it happened yesterday. This happened 5 years. It was 11 years old at that point. I smoked that cigar, and I've never had a cigar where not never, but very, very rare. I could probably name it on 5 fingers of my hand, where every single puff was different, and it tasted like a perfect wave. It had peaks, valleys, and it just flowed. Pure perfection. One of the greatest physical experiences not involving another person you could have.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that. Well, if there's any other questions from all of you, please shoot.
And
we're
Joey did
approaching-
mention, sorry, Joey did mention something that's like no more than really 7 years. I think that's a safe spot. If you do get a box to age, get 2 if you can, right? Like take the wine approach, where you take an extra case to just kind of see how it's evolving. And what really happens is, right, like you're looking to see what this cigar does at the start, midway through the race, and at the finish line, right? So when you get, ideally, if it's the same blend, it's consistency, and you trust someone, you can kind of see that progression. Some of my favorite old stuff to smoke is, when I do find it, is mid-2000s Davidoffs. The Millenniums smoked incredibly well because all of their strength, what little strength they had, faded all away, and it's just about the flavor. Similar to big tannic wines, right? Like big tannic wines, tannin is a protein found in wine that's just a product of the grapes themselves. So as oxygen interacts with the tannins, it forms these big polymerized chains that ultimately become really heavy to keep suspended in the wine itself. And then they fall to the bottom, where you get that sediment, right? So on a big tannic wine that's 25, 30 years in, all that tannin has polymerized and basically, I don't want to say vanished, but like went into the background. So you're just left with pure flavor. And a good aged cigar will kind of have that as well. That's not to say that a well-aged cigar won't have any strength. Obviously, it depends on what the blend was initially. But from my experience, if the cigar was blended in the right way, I feel that strength tends to fade away, and the highlight is the flavor and the overall experience, plus the patina of time, obviously.
Vlad, a question here. And I'd say I'm myself probably a little more experienced in wine than cigars. But if you would have to index it, say tasting wine is 100. You were talking about tannins, and tasting tannins is easy, let's say, especially for someone who's not as skilled. You see, okay, that's a weird taste, too many, something like it. What would you say? How does tasting cigar ranks compared to wine? If you index wine at 100, it must be incredibly harder. I at least that's how I feel about it.
So easier and harder at the same time, and here's why. Right, the flavor molecules, when you're tasting wine, the flavor molecules are suspended in liquid plus off gassing, right? Like they're actually in the air when you put it in your palate. Now, your sensory plate is located up here, literally between your two eyebrows, right? It's up here. So your point is when tasting wine, you close your mouth and use the extra air to push that wine from here, what is called retronasal, right? Like retronasal passage, pushing it through the back of your nose to get it up to here, and then exhale through the nose. This will give you more enjoyment out of the wine. You'll kind of pick up extra flavors and more out of it, basically. Cigar smoking, on the other hand, is easier because the smoke is in gas form, right? So it's not difficult to push it through your nose. However, it also carries some other things, which the downside is the temperature, right? And a lot of us do smoke cigars at a much higher pace than what we should be smoking at. And this isn't a critique. This is just the way life is. I've trained myself and I'll smoke cigars with my girlfriend and I'll literally look at it and say, okay, once the second arrow hits 12, we're going to take a puff, and then a minute and a half later, we're going to take another puff. What you're really aiming with cigar tasting in order to cool that smoke, and I like to compare this to smoking hookah or nargillas. What happens there, you take hot tobacco, hot smoke, it goes through water, cools down, and then you're basically enjoying cold smoke, right? It's very pleasant on the palate. You're kind of trying to do the same with cigars, and as my mentor Zdravko would call it, you're dancing on the edge of it going out, right? You're kind of trying to smoke cool smoke, and I don't do it often enough. Like I've smoked 2 cigars, admittedly a Robusto and a Petit Corona, but I've smoked it relatively fast. We've been doing it for what, 2 hours? A Robusto is a textbook 45 to 60-minute cigar. If you do it the right way, of course, if you slow it down to a minute and a half a puff and you're smoking cold smoke, you'll get 75 minutes out of it. Very, provided that it's actually properly filled and unrefilled and not burning faster. So how to tell if you're smoking cool smoke? When you push it through your nose, your nostrils, right, your actual nose, you shouldn't have a burning sensation. That doesn't mean that if it's a spice-driven cigar, right, like white and black pepper, for example, you'll get a tingling right here, literally at the bottom of your nostrils, right here, where you'll pick up that white and black pepper, or as well as on the back palate. But it shouldn't be unpleasant. Pushing cold smoke through your nose will help you pick up more things, and it won't be unpleasant, right? So if you slow your smoking down to a proper tempo, it'll work out very well. So that's the easier portion of the tape. The easier portion is it's much easier to pick up stuff because you're doing retrohaling, right? Retronasally, pushing it up here and then through your nose. The right way to do it is you don't want to exhale like 100%, 90 or 100% of your smoke through the nose. Obviously, that's excessive. I'll typically do 85 to 90% out my palate, right? Like out my mouth. And then the rest I'll hold a little bit back and push it very gently through my nose. So, and again, the fun part with cigars is a wine will enjoy it too fast for it to actually develop fully, unless we sit down and it's a great wine that's going to have a lot of changes and you're going to sit down and enjoy it over like an hour or two. But typically we'll crush 2 glasses within like an hour, right? That wine might not have fully evolved. A cigar, on the other hand, as the tobacco burns and the oils combine and everything combines with your saliva and everything else, you won't really experience, provided it's a complex cigar, you won't experience palate fatigue. And palate fatigue is a technical term where it basically palate satiety, really. So if you had to eat 5 pieces of white bread, you'd get bored 2 pieces in. Right? So you get bored because your palate is just not engaged enough. The cigars, provided they are complex enough, will keep you engaged. And again, then we can dive into the using cigars that motivate the salivation, right? Like higher acidity content. And I dislike using acidity because it's, right, from a consumer standpoint, it typically means something negative. But from a technical standpoint, it really means it activates your salivary glands and you start basically salivating. Your palate washes up and it's ready to take another puff. Then you have the tobaccos that do the opposite, kind of like tannin in red wine, where it dries out your palate, which isn't a bad thing, right? Both of those are very, 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 there's a reason for both types of tobacco, and depending on what you want to do in the blend. And Andre is right. There is both of us review cigars for Cigar Jury. And there is nothing worse for me than getting a 6x60 that's going to take me 2.5 hours to smoke, that is flat. And Ray as well. And I can't from a personal standpoint, if someone put this cigar out on the market, I always try to see what are they looking for. I always try to find something positive about it, because guess what? Maybe they just wanted it to be vanilla, cedar, cream, and oak for 75 minutes or 90 minutes or 2 hours. Maybe that's what they were going for. And I will judge it on that basis. But it does get, a monotonous cigar is not interesting, no different than eating, 3 slices of white bread back to back. So it really is about,
Makes very much sense.
if I'm doing it for my own personal, right, my personal enjoyment, I will look for complex cigars, because I am never getting that hour and a half or hour or 45 minutes that I'm going to spend enjoying it. And I do mean enjoying it, attentive appreciation, right? Like I do try to give it all the attention. And if I don't want to give it attention, I will smoke something that's really good, but that I don't have to pay attention the entire time, right? Like I just know that it's good. I've had it. I've given it the thought before, which is kind of your go-tos, if you will. And now I've kind of drawn all of it from the original question, but like wine is difficult because you're tasting, I guess it kind of translates to cigars as well. Your ability to pick up flavors and tastes directly relates to how adventurous you are as an eater, right? Primarily because that's where most of our flavor sensations come from, primarily food, right? So if you can, and if you consistently just eat a single dish and very rarely, if you're not an adventurous eater, you're probably not going to have the same experience as someone who enjoys using a variety of spices, different cuisines, things like that. And that isn't a dig or a bad thing, right? Like that just opens your tasting portfolio Rolodex, so to speak. That being said, English is a language, and again, this isn't a dig at the language. It's very poor when it comes to describing textures and flavors as well. A lot of it depends on your upbringing, right? A lot of this, as well as language itself. And again, I've really done a lot of studies into the actual technical side, what happens when you taste. There's a couple of really, really good books, if anybody's interested, written by neuroscientists and food scientists, that really delves into what happens when you eat something. How does it work? So for wine, when you're tasting, and this is very important when you're doing blind tasting. So blind tasting is a test of both skill and theory. Your tasting skills, where you're using ultimately an imperfect tool, your palate, and your theory to narrow down this entire massive wine world to one or two things that it could be, right? You funnel it down. So when you're doing this, you need to have an understanding of what your actual palate is and that palate satiety portion of it, right? As you take a small sip, you have to go through, you need to have a good power of recollection, which is a great book if anybody wants to read it, called Moonwalking with Einstein. It's very useful. You can use it in everyday life to remember, people, names, and things like that.
What was the name again?
The name of the book is called Moonwalking with Einstein. And if you are in a customer facing role or just in business in general, it's a great book to kind of help you build what the author coined as memory palaces, right? They took a bunch of these people who are, championship level. They know the pi number up to the 276 digit or whatever, right? Or, look at 700 cards and like put them all in order the way they were and things like that, right? Like Rainman level stuff, basically. But what it really is, it's a muscle. You just need to train it. And the way it helped on the wine tasting side of it is, and again, this all happens as I'm smelling a wine and tasting it. I imagine it's a hallway. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Okay.
Speaking of different flavors.
Yeah, coffee is exceptionally, ooh, this is really nice. Coffee is exceptionally complex as well. That is one portion of tastings that I haven't developed. I have a very rudimentary understanding and very much like I know what I like. I kind of know which processes I like. I know which countries I like and kind of go from there. But when it comes to these memory palaces, this is what happens when I taste. I close my eyes, right, to shut out any extra sensory stuff, right? Like I just close it and I'm like, okay, I'm focusing on the wine. I imagine a hallway, and in the first hallway on my right, this is all happening within milliseconds, right? I imagine a hallway, there's a door and it says fruits. I knock on the door, I open the door, and inside you have red fruits sitting on the sofa, black fruits sitting on the love seat, and then you have something else, you know, the blue fruits laying on the bed. And I look around the room and I go, okay, this smells like red fruits. So I'm going to look at the sofa and I'm going to go, does this smell like strawberries, cherries, cranberries, raspberries, or something else? Okay, it smells like raspberries. Cool. That gives me an idea. Only certain varieties are going to have strawberries as a note. Not enough to narrow it down, but like, let's say it smells like strawberries. Okay, strawberries or raspberries is actually a better example. Let's say it smells like raspberries. I'm picking up some blue notes as well, blueberries. Okay, let me look over to the bed. Okay, I see blueberries sprawled seductively on the bed. Okay, so blueberries are there. Then I look over. Okay, there's some black fruit notes as well. Okay, so there's blackberry, but is it blackberry? Is it blackberry leaf? Okay, it's blackberry, but is it fresh blackberry or is it blackberry jam? Or is it cooked blackberry? Is it compote? Right? And I'm still in the fruit room. This is still happening all in my head. So then I step out. The fact that it has red fruits, blue fruits, black fruits pushes me towards three things. Either it's a certain variety or it's a difference in actual growing, how much sun the grapes got. Typically, the less sun in a cooler climate will typically yield more fresh red notes. A darker, more sun-drenched climate will typically give you jammier and darker notes, right? So your blackberries and blueberries. But because it's raspberry, blueberry, and blackberry, it's the berry fruits. So I have that in my mind. I go over to the next door and I knock and it says wood. So I knock on the door. Okay, cool. I walked in. Let's see. Does it smell like vanilla, smoke, and French toast? If so, it's probably French oak. Does it smell like coconut and dill? It's probably American oak. Aha, it smells like oak. It smells like dill and coconut. Okay, so French, it's American oak. Is it new oak or is it old oak? Did they spend a lot of money on it or did they use something to just a little bit to add an extra layer of flavor? Okay, they didn't spend a lot of money on it. It's a secondary flavor rather than a driving force, which probably indicates that it's a used barrel. So at this point, I have two data points to go through, and I'm still just smelling it. I still haven't tasted it, right? So I go over to the next one. Okay, let's look at herbal stuff. Is there any dried fruit, spices, blah, blah, blah? And I go through all the different categories that are there. Now, knowing all these categories as well, I need to understand it from a chemical standpoint. What is being done to the wine to produce this flavor? So ultimately, I'll go for all the other stuff and I say, okay, this is a Dry Creek Zinfandel from Sonoma. It's using American oak. And the reason why I'm calling it a Zinfandel is because it was medium to full in body. It had medium high tannins. Acidity was medium. So they could have either fixed the acidity or they just let it. And Dry Creek points me towards that they didn't probably do anything with it. The combination of three different fruits, it's very apparent because Zinfandel has this ability called Miller-Rondage, which means that the grapes will get ripe at different time points. So you might have a fully ripe grape, and just ripe grape, and like one that's just starting to get ripe. So this all pushes me to saying, okay, this is going to be most likely a Zinfandel from the New World, Dry Creek, Sonoma, because again, I need to know the growing regions for Zinfandel and the styles. And that kind of pushes it down. The same thing works with cigars. I've gotten to a point where I just keep, and Andre does the same thing, where we'll just kind of go through, okay, I want to guess what's in this blend, and I have a pretty good run rate, which is i.e. more than 50%. When you kind of guess, like I've gotten to a point where I can kind of nail the factories as well, because if you smoke enough stuff coming out of those factories, they all have a signature. No different than winemakers, right? Like each terroir or factory or farm, whatever, has a certain signature that you can kind of pick up. So yeah,
Amazing.
that's kind of the
Amazing.
and then
Thank you for this walkthrough through your minds and through the doors of that hallway. Truly fascinating, I have to admit.
Oh, and a phenomenal book. I just saw it in the comments. Soil to Soul. It is the greatest cigar book ever written, in my opinion. It combines the technical aspects with the approachable, right, like down to earth aspects of like understanding. And if you do
Fantastic.
love cigars, buy the book. It is the greatest $100-something you'll spend.
Great,
For your enjoyment.
great call to action here at the end of today's session. And again, I don't want to call it the end for everyone staying. It may be my end. It's been a pleasure, Vlada, for 2 hours. And thank you everyone else for engaging in this insightful, I must admit, very joyful and just fun experience together. Thank you for having me. Being part of the discussion, more active than usual. We wish Reinhard the very best. He'll be waiting there next week, I assume. But yeah, thank you again, Vlada, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks again for taking the time, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.